Hi, everyone. Let's start things off. There's still some seats free, but come on up if you'd like. And I'd like to invite Michael de Grappa to come start our opening remark and kick us off.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Concordia's Digital Skillshare Days. Bonjour et bienvenue à toutes et à tous. This is our third and by far most ambitious annual Digital Skillshare event with 2 full days of learning sessions designed to support faculty and staff in the development of their skills. After 2 years of doing this event online, it's great to be here joining you in person to kick off the first hybrid edition with our Provost and Vice President Academic, Anne Whitelaw. Je souhaite mentionner que cette édition format hybride contribue à nos efforts en termes de développement durable en incorporant certaines meilleures pratiques en ce qui a trait à l'accessibilité, à la diversité et à l'inclusion, mais aussi au transport, aux commandites et à notre approche de réduction de déchets. Certaines séances de cet événement vont d'ailleurs explorer certains aspects de l'accessibilité et vont également offrir de l'information concernant la certification en événements durables et écologiques de Concordia. Soit dit en passant, il me fait plaisir de mentionner que cet événement a atteint le niveau or de notre certification écologique institutionnelle. We are indeed pleased to confirm that we have achieved the gold level of sustainability certification for this event. After more than 2 years of remote working, remote learning, and in large part the remote delivery of services, many Concordia employees have succeeded in integrating digital tools into their daily work activities to communicate with each other, collaborate, and deliver on projects. It's clear that Concordia's employees are benefiting from access to collaborative tools like Zoom, Teams, Planner, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Power BI. As some of you may know, Concordia also has a long-term subscription to Udemy for business learning platform, the business learning platform, which is available to faculty, staff, and students. Udemy offre plus de 7500 formations en ligne sur plusieurs thèmes tels que l'informatique nuagique, les compétences logicielles, les tendances technologiques, ainsi que le leadership, le marketing, la finance, la comptabilité et la gestion de projets, parmi tant d'autres. Since we first introduced Udemy in September 2020, Concordians have absorbed more than 2,500 hours of content, and we're delighted to renew our commitment to this service for our community. The goal of the next 2 days is to underline how valuable digital skills are to the success in so many aspects of university life and work, and to encourage us all to make time to develop new skills that will help us thrive in a context that's changing incredibly fast. Je suis certain que les 2 prochains jours vont nous permettre de découvrir de nouveaux outils et de nouvelles plateformes et que cet événement sera une belle opportunité d'apprendre ensemble, d'apprendre l'un de l'autre et de collaborer davantage. Before closing, I would like to offer my congratulations to all those responsible for what I know will be an overwhelmingly successful event. And now I'd like to invite Anne Whitelaw to tell you more about the event and the type of learning sessions you can enjoy over the next 2 days. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, since our last digital Skillshare event in January 2022, lots of things have changed at the university. There's been quite a bit of resumption of in-person teaching, but there's also been exploration of blended teaching and a renewal of the number of fully online courses that Concordia offers. We've also seen a large proportion of employees working in hybrid mode. But even with this evolution, this past year has continued to demonstrate the importance of fostering teamwork as many meetings and conversations remain online. In fact, we've maintained some of these online practices, such as the regular information sessions, the conversations with the provost that I hold with the department chairs, because we've witnessed that these are positive outcomes of better meeting attendance and engagement from our community members. The other thing that's going on that I think is an important context is that there's some ongoing work that continues through Future Concordia, which aims to develop a vision for the Concordia of the future, and in particular, how we can imagine new approaches to working, to teaching and learning, to student experience, and to the spaces that we inhabit. So the Digital Skillshare Days event embodies this future-focused approach. We understand that having more digital tools at our disposal can provide all of us with different solutions to meet the varying needs of their projects. Un vaste éventail de sujets seront abordés, dont le thème principal sera le partage des connaissances, des compétences numériques, ainsi que les avantages qu'entraîne ce type d'initiative pour les membres du corps professoral et du personnel dans l'exercice de leurs activités professionnelles quotidiennes. Les journées seront, pour les employés, une occasion de faire connaître à leurs collègues les outils et les plateformes numériques qu'ils ont découverts et leurs expériences avec ces ressources dans une atmosphère décontractée, propice à la collaboration et à l'apprentissage entre pairs. Ces 2 journées combineront les séances en personne et les séances interactives virtuelles. De plus, une sélection vaste et diversifiée de vidéos d'auto-apprentissage sera mise à la disposition des personnes qui veulent apprendre à leur propre rythme, or for people like me who can't stay for the whole event and will have to be doing this on the weekend, at night, in the bath, I don't know. New to this hybrid edition of the event is a virtual reality experience. Maybe that's what I should be doing. Participants can explore the VR installations here at Fourth Space while they are in between learning sessions. The VR experiences have been developed at Concordia for the Concordia community, and our colleagues from Knowledge One are available to walk you through the VR experience. Les séances d'aujourd'hui et de demain aborderont entre autres la ludification des plateformes d'apprentissage, la cybersécurité, la création de documents accessibles, les ressources pédagogiques, c'est pas facile en français, c'est pas facile en anglais non plus, comme Udemy, de même que les conseils et des trucs pour apprivoiser la plateforme Teams. Okay, so obviously I need to take that one because every time I go on Teams, I complain about Teams. So I hope there's a video on that one because, yeah, okay. La plupart des séances d'apprentissage seront animées par des membres du personnel et du corps professoral. Selon moi, cette rencontre sera une excellente occasion d'apprendre de vos pairs dans une atmosphère détendue où vous pourrez poser des questions et échanger des idées. I'm certainly looking forward to learning a lot during this event or following this event online. I encourage you to share your information from your experiences and the resources you've developed. Ask questions, reach out to colleagues with similar interests and needs during and after the event. The Digital Skillshare, that's a very difficult word to say too, Digital Skillshare website is ideal for these types of exchanges and offers additional resources for you to explore during and after the event. The Digital Skillshare Days SharePoint site, oh, come on, is also available for you to explore and will be the repository for the recordings of the live and virtual interactive sessions that you can view at your leisure after the event. So thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Paul Fournier, our Director of the Digital Transformation Office, who will introduce today's keynote speaker, Saul Carliner.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci Anne, merci Michael pour votre support continu pour l'événement. J'aimerais aussi vous remercier tous ici et en ligne, à tous les participants qui nous rejoignent aujourd'hui. C'est notre 3e événement en 3 ans. Et puis, je suis très ravi qu'on ait l'opportunité de continuer à itérer sur l'événement qui a vraiment débuté avec un focus sur Office 365 au début de la pandémie, mais qui maintenant inclut d'autres outils et d'autres plateformes qu'on a accès à l'université. J'aimerais aussi remercier tous les membres de l'équipe de planification Tu sais, nous, on fait ça sur un cycle continu. On prend une petite pause d'1 mois entre l'événement et puis après ça, on recommence à planifier l'année d'après. C'est un groupe de personnes qui sont impliquées à toutes les semaines. À toutes les 2 semaines, on se rencontre, on fait un petit checkpoint, puis ça marche à cause de eux. J'aimerais aussi remercier l'équipe de Force Space du 4e espace et la bibliothèque aussi pour nous avoir vraiment accueillis pour la première fois qu'on fait ça en personne. Donc, c'est très fantastique. On a des belles installations à Concordia et puis c'est des beaux espaces à se rencontrer dedans. Je suis content d'y revenir en ce moment aussi. A key component of the event is the ability for faculty and staff to make time in their work schedules to learn something new and to improve their digital skills. Another aspect is how we can build a community of people who are interested in sharing what they know with their colleagues. And to me, this is something that I'm particularly happy about. It's about encouraging people to help others around them. It's about being colleagues, it's about sharing what you know, and kind of building a community of practice around this. You know, a lot of the people who are taking part of this event are not, it's not part of their job description, it's not, you know, they're not specifically tasked with doing this. A lot of them volunteer their time because they want to share with people, and I think that's the kind of community spirit we're trying to encourage through this event, and it's very important. As Anne mentioned, the event fully supports peer-to-peer learning and community collaboration. Before I move on to introduce our keynote speaker, Saul, which I'm very pleased to have with us this time. This is the first time we have one of our own faculty members actually be one of our keynotes. So to me, that's a nice achievement in that regard. I'd like to take a moment just to share some of a couple of reflections. You know, part of what our team, the Digital Transformation, does is trying to help people navigate changes, you know, and we know there's a ton of changes that happen at the university. And that's made me think a lot about what that process is. And a lot of changes around learning new things, and applying those new tools and everything. And personally, and I experience this all the time, it's a lot of the frustration that comes with not being good at doing something right away. You know, there's a lot we see online and in the virtual world where you just assume that you should be instantly good and perfect and, you know, curated and things should be easier. And there's a feeling that, you know, there must be something wrong if you're not getting something right away. But the fact is that discomfort's a perfectly natural part of learning and being able to do something. And for myself, I think some of the focus and, you know, sometimes the frustration of that process is something where we complain about the technology, we're frustrated with ourselves, we throw our hands up and say, well, this is just junk. And so, you know, but I think part of the response to that and how we need to start shifting our focus is around, you know, that discomfort and that learning process is part of it. That's something you have to get through, and it's something that will get better over time. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is just cut yourself some slacks. You're learning, you're trying something new. You should congratulate yourself for trying to learn something new. You're putting yourself out there to be frustrated, and it's fine, you know. Make friends with that frustration. It's a tool that lets you know that you're actually going through the learning process, and eventually it'll get better. So from that side, I want to encourage everybody to embrace that part of the learning process, and that's it. Now, just to introduce Saul, our keynote speaker this morning, tell you a little bit about him. Saul is a professor of Concordia's Department of Education and a generalist in learning and communication with substantial tenures both in academia and industry in both fields. His teaching and research focus on the design of instructional and informational materials, managing the groups that produce those materials, and related issues of policy and professionalism are at the core of his research focus. Saul will be speaking about the challenges. So Saul is doing 2 keynotes, one today and one tomorrow, and I encourage you to attend both. Tomorrow's will be virtual, but today's will be speaking about the challenges of identifying our digital skills and the extent to which they should be developed. In this morning's session, he will provide a framework for guiding us through these challenges. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And on Friday, tomorrow, Saul will give a virtual keynote session about how digital tools have reshaped the work of faculty, students, and administrators by looking at the typical software that faculty member, staff member, and a student might use in a typical day over the span of 25 years. So we're getting a history lesson at the same time. The session reflects on which digital tools were flashes in the pan and which ones have become institutionalized and part of everyday life. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing those sessions, Saul. We're a bit ahead on schedule, so what I will propose to do is let's take a short break. We'll come back at 10:30, and Saul will take us into his keynote address at that point. So thank you, everybody.
So hello everyone, welcome and welcome back. Those of you who just joined us online for day 1 of Digital Skillshare Days. We are kicking things off with a keynote address on developing your digital skills with our special guest here today, Saul Carliner. Just to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui, and we make this acknowledgement to bring both awareness and, of course, understanding of the history of Indigenous peoples and their territories, and as a call to action to rethink one's own relationship with the city, the land, and environment. If you're new to Fourth Space, welcome, online or in person. Here we work with our university community to mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities. And we've had the pleasure of working with our colleague, Director of Digital Transformation, Paul Fournier, and the team of folks behind the scenes here who made this 2-day event happen. We're so pleased that you were able to join us. And it's now my pleasure to pass it over to you, Saul. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And first, I'd like to welcome you all. I want to thank Paul for this opportunity and congratulate him and all of the other speakers on the amazing program they've put together, because most of it was just soliciting, like, what would you like to speak about, and tell the others how much I'm looking forward to learning from them. And although I may have to do the Ann Whitelaw way and do some of it offline after the day with all the meetings that are going on. I'm here today to talk to you about developing your digital skills, a framework to guide you. And as we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about a new hobby that I picked up during the pandemic. It's not that I hadn't used it before, but I really got kind of addicted to YouTube. Like, really bad. And although there are certain channels that I like a lot, one of the ones that I really got into, and by the way, I got my spouse into, the Judge Judy channel. There's just something very comforting about her directness about everything. I mean, the cases can be ridiculous, they can be heartbreaking, they can be frustrating. And I always like to match wits. It's like, how's she going to judge on this one? And she's not the nicest judge. I mean, this is a person who comes up and, like, you know, someone says, I'd like to judge. Like, I don't want to hear that. And says, this is my courtroom, not yours. I'm your friend right now, but it could change, you know? All the things like you want to say that you know that's really beyond inappropriate. Which gets me to the next thing that you're probably thinking. What in God's name does any of this have to do with developing your digital skills? Well, I'll tell you, does anybody know how Judge Judy became Judge Judy? Well, here's the deal. Back in 1992, 1993, she was Judith Scheindlin, judge of the family court in New York. She was a legitimate, real judge who did family court cases. And she was obviously articulate, and she got interviewed on 60 Minutes. And they were producers who produce or were about to produce new judge shows were very impressed with what they saw. And they said, you know, we're looking to do a new judge show. We'd be interested in having you as our judge, which would mean she'd have to retire from the bench and take up a new position. Well, she was thinking about retiring anyway, because they were about to computerize her courtroom, and she didn't feel like she had the ability to learn the computer. As we know, that probably in her case was one of the better decisions that she ever made, because she went from being a judge to collecting a pension. So there was no way she could lose with this deal. And became the queen of daytime television, making at her, I think the last contract she had for the Judge Judy show was like maybe $50 million a year, and $95 million extra for all the reruns. And the reason this is relevant is this is the only person I have ever heard of who managed to not develop digital skills and get away with it. For the rest of us, digital skills are affecting our job. And in fact, technology is affecting every type of job. Before I talk about the ones in the university, let me just give you one that you probably don't think of as being heavily dependent on technology. Being someone who takes orders at a fast food restaurant. First of all, they come in from the touch screen. They come in from the cash register. They come in from the drive-through. Anybody know how they're taking orders through the drive-through? AI. It's not a human you're talking to. You're talking to voice-activated technology increasingly. And then for fun, of course, you have mobile orders coming either directly from their app or from some of our friendly apps like, Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes and other kinds of things. And there are people who are working in minimum wage jobs in the fast food environment said, I can't take this anymore. They're working McDonald's. They went to Burger King down the street thinking they were going to get away from it. Didn't happen. So technology is affecting even the jobs we don't think it affects. So let's look a bit closer here. Recruitment. I mean, certainly have been using technology for years just to keep track of the massive number of applications. But over the past several years, we've moved from a paper to an all-digital admissions process. We use digital means to recruit students, both having virtual open houses, to using various types of targeting technologies in Facebook, Instagram, and other applications to reach people. And then we use artificial intelligence to figure out which ones are going to be most successful in the university, so we can figure out, at the very least, who is going to have the best record at completing and getting out. But those students who admit that may need additional support, we might be able to anticipate what kind of support and staff up accordingly. Let's look at facilities. One of my favorite channels I found on YouTube during the transit, in addition to Judge Judy, of course, is something called the B1M, which is the construction channel. And almost everything out there is modeled on computers. Once the building is open, they're monitored 24/7 for air quality, for air temperature. And by the way, if you can be in a modern building that's properly managed versus an older building where they don't have this technology, at a time when they're transitioning from air conditioning to heat or vice versa, I will tell you that you will definitely notice the role of technology. There are sensors. One other, it's not so much a traditional facilities thing, but you may have heard that there was this horrible bridge crash in Minnesota back, I think it was 2007, 2008. And it was a highway that when I lived there, I used to travel over quite frequently, and the bridge just gave way. When they built the replacement, they put monitors in there to make sure that the bridge they would be alerted that there was a problem on the bridge so that they would never be in that situation again. Let's move a little bit more directly to my life, into the department administration. We used to, first of all, operate by paper. We would have centralized files. We have a whole room of nothing but standing file cabinets. They're increasingly empty. Why? Because those files have moved virtually. First to Documentum, which is a repository, and more recently and more accessibly, I might add, to the OneDrive/SharePoint, same basic thing. Meetings. Used to be you set up a meeting. If you wanted to set up a virtual meeting, you had to go to a different app and set up a Zoom meeting. Now you can just click a little slider in your Outlook and you have a Zoom meeting, a Teams meeting. You also have the Outlook connection that we've made over. It's not brand new, but the extent to which we use Outlook these days, and then of course the introduction of Teams to further the communication between people has been significant. And then finally, the life of the faculty. As faculty, we use technology, of course, to manage the work that we do. When we're teaching, we increasingly use what we call learning management or course management systems. Our university now uses, and it's been using for quite some time, Moodle. We've had some predecessors before that. But we also use the student information system, which I will just tell you a lot of faculty still have some challenges with, like remembering to press save to submit your grades, things like that. But that's important. But we also have to keep up with the technology in our jobs. My background is technical communication, technical writing, and instructional design. And I see some of my friends from Knowledge One here. And so they have a much greater command of authoring tools, but I need to at least be aware of what the authoring tools are, both for documentation as well as for e-learning, which means I have to have a double load. And I need to be aware, at the very least, of what they do. People in geography, the geographic information systems become increasingly complex over time. People in fields like communication studies, certain parts of literature research, certain parts of historical research, doing narrative analysis, the tools that we have now to uncover patterns in the data. So there's research material. And then of course, if you're in the natural sciences, there's all kinds of material, all kinds of technology that you use just simply to manage the operation of your lab, to manage the collection of data, to manage, you know, if you've got living specimens, you have to manage those specimens also. So there's a fair amount of technology everywhere that we have in our jobs. And I've only probably cut the surface. But what's important to know is in an effort to remain employable, and this is really what the technology or the digital skills issue is about, is first, for all of us as workers, we have to identify the technologies that are entering our workspace. And then we have to develop the appropriate level of skill. Notice that word appropriate. I'll share a cute story. When my mom's office was computerizing, she kept thinking she needed to, she worked in training and development, and she was doing some record keeping and stuff like that. She kept thinking, I need to learn how to program. And I was like, Mom, you don't need to learn. You need to learn how to turn on the computer, get into the application you're using, and enter the data that you need to enter, and that's it. But she kept thinking she needed to do more. I thought Paul made a really good point also, that we have learning, and everyone always thinks learning is supposed to be fun, and those of us in education think it's supposed to be fun. I have news for you, which apparently is not news for any of you. I think the other thing too is sometimes if you don't experience pain, you may not be experiencing growth. Learning is about growth, and sometimes there will be pain associated with that. And frustration, that's part of the process. Our job is to make it less painful, but we can't always take away the pain. So what I'd like to do is talk about both of these challenges as we move forward. So the first one is identifying the technologies entering our workspace. In the end, I mean, the university will tell us in some cases, it's like we're going to replace this big system or that. But there are a lot of other technologies that no one's going to tell you anything about. You're going to have to kind of figure out on your own. So how do you go about doing that? This is my system. You can have your own. I actually follow job ads for people in my line of work. And I do that for two reasons. One for scholarly reasons, and the other for selfish reasons. I don't know if you ever heard of the country singer Tammy Wynette. She actually was a hairdresser, as they technically call it, a cosmetologist, before she became a country singer. And as long as she was working, she always kept her cosmetology license current, because she felt like this country music thing may not last forever. And to be really honest, if you look at the careers of a lot of people in the entertainment industry, keeping that cosmetology license was a pretty smart idea. I feel the same way. I mean, I wasn't sure, would I get tenure? Would I be able to survive the academic environment? So I always want to make sure I was employable in the, the industry sector if I needed to be. The other thing too is that we're producing students, and it's not producing is the right, we're working with students who will ultimately go out into the workspace. And we need to be aware of what they're going to be encountering and what they need, how they need to be prepared. And it makes a huge difference when you prepare your students for the work world that they're going to be in, which is not the one that we were in. And mine is increasingly distant from the one that they're experiencing. So when you're looking at these job ads, you want to look at the skills that are sought. What skills does the employer want? And then specifically which technologies they want. What I find in a lot of job ads, and I've done a few studies where they actually characterize these things, it's easier to identify the technical skills that people need because they're more concrete. I mean, who's going to go and say, you always want someone who's going to be good with other, cooperative and collaborative with other workers. And they might say that, to be really honest, just going to say, I want someone who's going to be rude and obnoxious to everybody that they work with. But the other thing is, how do you really assess that? Whereas, are you able to produce e-learning using Storyline? That I can assess, that's easy. So that's one of the reasons a lot of employers actually rely on these. But for the purpose of this discussion, really important for us to note that. The other thing is, the next thing is read the trade press. If you're not, and this is not the peer-reviewed literature, because the peer-reviewed literature, first of all, is writing about, publishing studies that were done at most recent 6 months before they get published. When you look at the publication cycle, the writing cycle, and the review cycle, that's on a good day. In many cases, they were done as much as 3 to 5 years ago, maybe even longer, and that's just the nature of peer review. It's good for solid quality research, not so much for current information. You want current information and you're working in a somewhat professionally aligned field, read the trade news. That's what's going to tell you what's current. It'll tell you what skills are in demand, either directly or indirectly. It'll tell you what technologies. A lot of times they just have these news of who bought whom and what, and there's often some really good little nugget of technology-related news in there. And then the other thing is, and I happen to be in one of them, for fields that have credentialing, follow changes to the competency model. And there's a lot of terminology in there. So the next slide, I actually unpack that. What a credential is something like that is the third-party validation of skills. That's what a credential is. And it comes in 3 varieties. There's the license, the certification, and a badge. A license is for any profession. I mean, technically, it's any profession that is, the government says you have to have a license to practice. In theory, the purpose of having that license is there's something that you can do that would harm the other person pretty seriously. So for example, why does cosmetology require a license? Oh, because you got scissors and razors and you're near like the jugular vein and you might like sort of kind of kill somebody. So you probably want someone who's licensed to do that. Doctors, I don't think anybody has any question about. There's some other fields that they require licenses. And and it's not necessarily in every jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions, they require a license to become a florist, believe it or not. The second thing is certification. Certification is a voluntary credential. So in other words, no one's holding a gun to your head and said, you don't have it, you ain't going to get hired. But employers can state it's a preferred credential. And so otherwise it acts just like a license. There's some kind of process that you go through to be credentialed. You have to demonstrate your skills and prove that you are able to do this work or competent to this work. And then there's the lightest version is a badge, which it's interesting because I think you're going to see the most development in that area. What a badge is generally it's a digital thingy that you can stick in a LinkedIn profile, for lack of a better definition, that is supposed to be indicative of the fact that you have demonstrated in some way that you have a skill. And sometimes the badge comes from just doing something online, and the system infers, and increasingly they're getting better at inferring that you have a competency based on your online behavior, because it's tracking literally everything in your browsers. And it knows what those keystrokes mean. So there's a lot of smarts in there. But it can also be something as simple as you completed a particular activity and you passed a test, and it can give you the badge. I have, believe it or not, a badge that says I'm a certified facilitator of training, whatever in God's name that means, but I'm very proud of it. And then there's the competency model itself. The competency model is the foundation of skills, knowledge, and abilities underlying the credential and that the credential certifies or attests to. And this is one that I actually helped develop. It's called, it's from the Institute for Performance and Learning, and this is the competency model that's used for the certified training and development professional and the certified training practitioner credentials. And one certifies people who just facilitate. I probably shouldn't use the word just there. But it's the singular competency. And the certified training and development professional certifies all 7 competency areas in that. So that's one, just figuring out what you should be familiar with. I will say one other thing about competency models. That tells you what you should be familiar with today. It's not as forward-linking because when you validate a competency model, you also are using people who are currently working in the field. So it needs to be designed in such a way that people who are now in the field, if they have to demonstrate something from their current work, can do that. And if you're looking at kind of the bleeding edge of technology, the majority of your potential certified members are not going to be able to do that because they're not at the bleeding edge, they're at the average edge, which is okay. But the next thing is that, okay, you got these skills, to what extent do you need to develop them? And so this is a 5-level model that was actually introduced to me many years ago when I was in industry, but that I've adapted on my own a bit over since, and I want to talk about. But it takes you from having no skill to being literally the expert. So I want to talk about each one of these different levels one at a time. The first one is level 1, no skill, really easy one to develop. But I might add, it could be, depending on what field you're in, having level 1 skill may also be a sign of incompetence and future redundancy. So don't be proud of having level 1 in a technology where you should have something stronger, because that could be a sign that you may be redundant or you're going to have some problems on the job. Level 2, obviously a little bit more than nothing here, but although this is like basically you have an intellectual familiarity with the skill. So you can define what it is. If I were to name technology X, you could say it does, this. Name some of the key capabilities. In other words, what can someone do with this technology? Name at least 2 products in this category of technology. And when I use the word product, I always thought it was weird because I think of a product as something like this, a watch or a computer, something hard. And they said software products. Well, it's digital, but they're products, just like my watch and my computer and my coffee mug. And you should be able to name at least 2 because there are different ones in every category. And then finally, differentiate among them. Believe it or not, people, it's not like cereal where someone makes cornflakes and someone else makes cornflakes with a generic brand. People develop software for particular uses. And I'll give you some examples in an area that many of us are familiar with. So there's this area called learning or course management systems, which are not technically identical, but a lot of people use the terms interchangeably. Some learning management systems were designed for use in the corporate training environment, which is where I began my career. And they were meant to do things like keep track of enrollments, charge people, get payment for them. That was always a really big one. For internal people, it was to do an internal chargeback if necessary, because different training departments operate in different ways. And then if someone completed the course, they needed to update their employee education record so that it was listed there officially. In some cases, just because they cared about whether their employees learned something. For many other companies, it was because you took a compliance training course and we had to prove to the government and needed to generate a list in a second that you took the course. Universities also developed systems. They were more course management systems. And these were meant at first really to deal with a little nasty problem that we had. Many of you probably did not work in universities in the late 90s, early 2000s, but they gave us these horrible limits for when we wanted to make copies. So you got, like, for your class, you got 25 pages per student to copy. And if you're like me and you have a 25 or 26 page syllabus, you're kind of, let's just say, and the only way to get stuff to your students was either pay for it yourself, which of course, I'm not going to do, I'm cheap. But the other thing is to find a way to just upload it and share it. And they came up with this class of systems called course management systems. And they priced them very, very attractively to get universities to adopt them. They were super cheap and people were buying them really quickly. And at first you upload a syllabus, you might upload a class assignment, then you could do a little discussion board. And they kept adding the capabilities. But one year, it's like when they had a certain critical mass, and this is really significant, they decided to jack up the price, like double it, early 2000s. And so what happened was everybody decided they were going to start cross-doing. So the corporate was like, Well, as long as they're paying that much money, let's go after the university market. And the university market's like, they're not buying me anymore. I'm going after the corporate market. So you see course management systems doing what learning management systems do and vice versa. This is really important. Software works best on the system it was designed to work on and for the purpose it was designed to work for. So I know of corporate clients that use Moodle, which was designed to get around the cost, but then there's the support is all your expense, so it saves a little money. But it's not, I mean, and you can charge now and all kinds of other stuff, but it works best in a university environment. And a lot of these other ones that were designed for the training and development environment, they were really designed for training and development. And you can use them in school, fine. It's just they're not as easy to use because they're little things that they do, and then workarounds become really not pleasant. So that's why you need to be careful about that. So that's why differentiating among products becomes important, because you may be not using them, but you may be making decisions. And if you don't know what you're making a decision about and you're just relying on a third party, you may not be making the best decision for your team. So here's some examples in which you need level 2 skills. So technology used in what I call adjacent work. It's not work that you do, but someone else is doing it for you. You need to know what that technology does so you know what the capabilities are. It's helpful to be aware of the technologies that may be making its way into your work. And then let me give you some examples. Pre-Unity, we needed level 2 knowledge, everybody in this university, that something was coming where we were going to be doing this and having this new system. It didn't give you the skills, but at least you were aware of what the capabilities would be. One of my favorite moments ever teaching a workshop, I was teaching a workshop on how to design wizards, which is a special thing where the system does a lot of the work under this surface and people just fill in the basic information that the system needs. Well, someone from a very large online university was saying, my programmers say they can't do this stuff, but I never really know if they can't or they just don't feel like it or don't know how. And I will tell you that a lot of programmers do not develop, nothing against the programmers here, but a lot of them have not kept their skills up to date. And so they always give you a real hard time when you ask for something that the people down the road are getting done. And if you have a level 2 knowledge, you can say, well then, you can ask 2 questions. Why is it that they have this and we don't, and they have the exact same technology infrastructure? Something doesn't add up here. And to me, it's adding up to you lack skills. We have a problem. Or the other one is that maybe they do have something. But you need to be able to ask those questions. The other question you can ask, is, well, what can you do? But it needs to work. Because and so it makes you a more pointed and smart consumer. The other thing I found is that when you do know your technology, people try to pull things over on you. I'll just give you one example. Years ago, I was working with a not-for-profit, and I was the president. Our executive director was scared of the technology, and the membership had voted that we would have an internet server. It was very early in the days of the internet. The executive director brought in some professor from the University of Maryland telling me we need 50 people to support this. And I was like, he said, you just made a fool of yourself, Saul. I said, no, you're the one who made a fool of yourself. I want to put something really clear. Everyone else is doing it with their own staff. So clearly you've got either an expert who doesn't know what he's talking about, or you're just scared to do this. And the second thing you forgot was that I'm the one who signs your performance appraisal, not them. Your board of directors, which is your boss, had told you that you're going to do this. And it's not like I command people, but in a case like that, when someone's trying to snow you, you need to be able to fight back with actual facts and let when people are telling you false information. So that's why it's important to be a smart consumer. So think for yourself, which technologies would you personally need level 2 skills with? Let's move on to level 3, which is the big difference between level 2 and level 3. You still need everything you've got in level 2, but level 3, you're actually using it. You've touched it, you've done something with it. So you can start the application, you can enter and change information, you can handle common tasks that arise, and you can quit the software, and ideally remember to save things when you do so, which seems to be a problem, including for me. And some situations in which you would need level 3 skills. Software used to perform job tasks either very frequently, like daily or weekly, but even less frequently. So I'm thinking about entering grades. We do it 2-3 times a year, but you need to have level, you need to be able to do it on your own. No one's going to do it for you. Performing tasks that do not require much customization. You just basically, I'm doing this, I'm not doing anything fancy with it, I'm just going to do what they told me. And some examples, entering grades into the student information system I keep coming back to, creating a basic Moodle site for a class. Every instructor really needs that now because students expect it. And then setting up a basic Zoom meeting. It's not a really difficult skill, but it does take some time to just get familiar with it and to know what the sequence of screens are. So think for yourself, what do you need level 3 skills for? Level 4 is everything in level 3, but now you're getting to be like a power user is a term for it. And what you're trying to do here is tailor the software or hardware to your preferences. And so you're going to do something, but it's stuff that if you just follow the directions in the documentation or the online videos on YouTube or the online support that's provided by the manufacturer or publisher, depending if it's software or hardware, you'll be able to do this. And the other thing that you'll be able to do is troubleshoot documented problems. So it's not the most complex, but something goes wrong, you can figure out like where's the glitch? Oh yeah, it's here, I'll fix it myself, no big deal. Or it is a big deal, but you can do it yourself and you feel accomplished. So here's some situations in which you would need a level 4 skill. Software that you use to perform tasks that requires some flexibility or customization. Again, let me give you an example. So let's say you're using Word and you don't like the standard template and you don't like any of the templates they make available to you, which until recently really was not usable because I thought they were all kind of ugly. But that's just my personal opinion. Well, you would have to know how to go into change name styles and save them as a template and maybe do a little bit of graphic work with it. It's not that hard to do, but you have to develop some further skills to customize it. So the look of your Word files is your unique branded look, or whether it's branded for your organization, just simply your personal brand. Same thing with PowerPoint, you can do that. Another example of situations, you're going to use the software in a non-standard way. Give you an example that's more common now, but it wasn't when I first started doing this. Most people use some very specialized publishing software to create books. Me being cheap, I decided to use Word because that kind of came with the computer, and all those other ones cost a couple $1,000s. It didn't come with the computer, and I didn't really feel like spending $2,000 on like Interleaf or something like that. So you could actually, probably from the mid to late 1990s, create entire books in Word. But you had to, it was a non-standard way. They said that they supported certain things. Anybody who ever used those functions knew that didn't work the way they were supposed to. They had this thing called a master document. What a lie. And so you had to kind of figure out, how do I do this book? So you ended up having this massive file, but you had to learn how to do tables of contents, automatically generate them, which means you had to know how to use name styles. Again, something that the average user doesn't know. Most people create a heading. They just bold it and they center it and they think they have a heading. They don't have a heading. They have a bolded center text. If you want a heading, you have to code it as a heading. This is a level 4 level of use. So some other examples in which you would be having level 4 knowledge. One of the things that I'm blessed with, we have a couple of people in my department who are program assistants who, whenever you have a completely non-standard student request, know how to work with it. We had one last year. It was like one of these real heartbreaking situations. We had a student who had left back in the mid-2000s, left his master's degree partially finished, went to work, got a great job, and then wanted to come back, started coming back, and got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I get this note from him that was, it was just like, I'm so sorry I waited until this late because I really would have loved to have finished my degree. And I just like, I think there's stuff we can do to make his dream come true. And part of it was allowing some old courses to come back onto that would have otherwise lapsed to come back on. And the other part was shifting him from one option, the thesis option, to our internship option, giving him credit for work, which we normally would not have done. And then finally, once we had all that in, then there were still a whole bunch of other exceptional things that I did not know about. Like in addition to giving him credit to make sure he didn't have to pay extra at this point in his life, we had to also give him financial credits for all the courses he took. And you have to do a lot of overrides in the system. That's an example of level 4 knowledge, knowing that needs to be overridden, and this is how you do that. Creating customized digital course materials. The team at Knowledge One, I tried something really nutty. I wanted one course to serve 2 different groups of students. And we found a way to do a 2-path course. And it wasn't through everything, it was just through certain pairs of units. And we let students pick their path. But that was something that required level 4 knowledge. And then finally, generating non-standard reports from an administrative system. Sometimes you just need something, systems, and the standard set of reports are pretty rich these days, but there's always something above and beyond that you need, and the system can do that. But you have to know how to get that report out. That's level 4 knowledge. So consider for yourself, with which technologies do you need level 4 skills? And then finally, level 5 is the expert. And really, this is going beyond the stuff that's documented and doing all the stuff that's not. In other words, you're futzing around with the system and making it do things. You're customizing it or tailoring it, or you're solving problems that even the documentation at best can only give you a general strategy for. And you can develop extensions of the software or related applications. So you're somebody who, you can do your own coding, or at least coding with this, customization with this, and you can make something happen. So here's some situations when you would need level 5 skills. And most of us aren't in these situations. When everyone else doesn't know what they're doing, they call you. It's like, what do I do? It's like, I don't know. And you don't want to give that the answer. As part of your work, you need to push the boundaries of the system. You're being asked to do something in a way that is beyond what you've done before and anybody else has done. So designing a Moodle site to serve as a central point for all courses in an entire program rather than a single course. And we've done that at K1 for one of our online degrees. We don't have that many, but Moodle is designed for courses, not programs. So that's really kind of strange territory. The documents don't help. Or you're dealing with a problem that leaves all the other technical specialists stumped and they're looking for you. That would be the example. So consider which technologies you personally need level 5 skills for. What you will find is most of your skills, level 2 or level 3 meets almost all of your daily needs. Eventually, as you use something more commonly, you may move into level 4, and that's fine. And by the way, getting to level 3 doesn't mean it happens on the first try. I used it and that's it. As Paul was mentioned earlier, it may take a few tries to get to a comfort. You may have level 3 technically, but you're not at a comfortable level 3. It may take a little bit of a while to get, and that's okay. You don't have to be there. The fact that you're doing it is important. The other thing that I think is really important, smart workers can figure out how to transfer their skills. I want to show you a little bit about my experiences with word processing. I actually learned word processing on a tag-based system. In other words, you had to tag everything. Is it a heading? Is it a paragraph? Is it a list? If it's a list, is it an ordered list, which is basically a numbered list, or an unordered list, which is a bulleted list, but for some reason they like ordered and unordered instead of bulleted and numbered, which to me is a lot clearer. Anyway, so I learned in my last year of university on a system called Scribe, which is, I believe, one of, if not the very first word processor. I will say this, my grades went up on an entire grade point thanks to word processing, because you could write things the way you're supposed to write, which means, number one, write what you know, come back later, write the other stuff, and you could type it in and you didn't have to retype it later. So it made a huge difference. The other thing is when I hand wrote everything, it was illegible, and that obviously something on a printer was much more legible. Well, I moved from there. I worked as a tech writer for many years, and we worked with something, the names of the product changed, but the commercial name was something called Bookmaster. Well, when you're working with Scribe, you want to do a heading 3, it's .h3, as I recall. I'm old, so I don't know if my memory's that great. I do remember my Bookmaster well because I used it for many years. H3 was still there, but notice it changes from a period to colon H3 period at the other end. So you had something in each one. So years later, I'd left my job and this HTML stuff starts showing up. It's like, oh my God, I got to learn something else. So I'd looked at some sample coding. I was like, I think, and I was lucky because I was going to a conference. I was running into some old coworkers who knew Bookmaster and knew HTML. I said, okay, let me ask you a little simple question. Is basically, you change like the colon in the period to an open arrow and a close arrow, And that's basically HTML. I said, yeah. It's like, okay, so I know HTML. And by the way, they had WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get. Process. I didn't use it. I used the tech because I was comfortable working in like, Notepad and coding everything. And I also wanted to see if I could actually get it to work the way it was supposed to. My big problem is I was always open bold and I forget to close it. And you have to say, okay, where does it begin to bold, where it's not supposed to bold anymore? But really, so in other words, a lot of times we think things are new skills, but if we take a step back, take a deep breath, it's like, nah, it's the same thing. It's a little different. Think about another one, PowerPoint. I remember I was at a presentation once and someone said, how did you all learn PowerPoint? And the person said, how many of you went to a class? And by the way, I'll ask you, how many of you went to a class to learn PowerPoint? Notice all the hands that are not up. Because that's how everyone learned. Nobody goes to class. There are PowerPoint classes. I don't know why, because nobody goes to them. But that gets you the basic. You enter something and you get a basic slide. And these days you have template. When I first learned, they didn't know what a template was. The next thing is to build efficiency. I'll tell you a cute story. So I had a neighbor who actually taught this stuff for a living when people actually paid money to go to PowerPoint classes. And she watched me. She's like, "Saul, you don't mind giving me 5 minutes. It's the most generous thing I've ever heard. 5 minutes." And she wasn't joking. I can teach you a few little tricks that will make you so much more efficient. And she did. She taught me about outline mode. And I use that to get every presentation started. You just put everything in outline mode, you put your objectives in, you copy them a second time term, every second version of your objective into a heading, you've got half your presentation done right there. You copy a couple of slides at the end that I use for every and almost the presentation. So that was efficiency. But then PowerPoint, especially in the last 5 to 8 years, it's really gotten super, super powerful. And I know a lot of people out there say awful, awful things about PowerPoint. You will not hear them from me. I'm a huge fan. I think it's maligned. I think it's discriminated against. I think people are jealous of it, but because they didn't invent it. But PowerPoint does some amazing stuff. And what you do is sometimes you just kind of accidentally fall onto different things. In other cases, someone shows you. So like the people at K1, when I was working on my last course, they taught me how to record screens, which is really super easy. I also learned that you can just record a PowerPoint presentation and work with some other software to create papers. So I usually do speeches for the scientific process will be a speech, then you do a conference paper, then you do the published paper. Well, if you could just take your PowerPoint presentations, record them, upload the recording and get a transcript out of it, how much quicker is that to get something done? Technology skills alone, also, I think this is important, do not guarantee long-term employability. Soft skills, which the Canadian government now calls essential skills, are super important. It's great that you can use all the technology in your job. If you're obnoxious to everybody around you, you're still hard to employ, to put it really bluntly. And these are the more durable skills. They're more difficult to quantify and assess, but they often play as important, if not more important, of a role in your career success. An example, someone did studies of engineers. And 1 year out of engineering school, they said, what would you wish you had more of? Oh, more technical, more technical. 10 years out, same question, I wish I paid more attention to all of those communication courses. Because they start to see the engineer who doesn't know how to communicate and collaborate with their coworkers is the one who doesn't move ahead in their career. The one who has difficulty finding new employment. So that's not a small issue. But, so you can adapt this 5 model. I don't know why this screen keeps going, sorry. You can adapt the 5-level model for other skills. Sorry, something's not moving in the right direction here, so I apologize. Okay, 1. And yeah. So you can adapt this for those soft skills. I apologize for my technical incompetence there. And this is adapted, which gets me to the worst career advice I ever received. People, I was talking to some very, very senior people in my field, and they said, what should I do to maintain my employability and move me to the next level? I said, well, stop being so focused on those technical things. And I know what the point was, is if you become a tools jockey, People will not see you as anything other than someone who can do production work. That's not what I wanted. On the other hand, completely ignoring the technical skills is also really bad advice. And it's like finding that balance is a real challenge. But this is why it matters so much to me. Very early in my career, I was on a dinner cruise at a conference. And some guy like accosted me at the beverage hour. And he goes, "You've got to do something about certification." I was nobody. I was like a speaker at the conference. I think I was maybe been one of the keynotes, but that was all I was. I just finished work. I was working on my last degree. I was nobody. I'm still nobody, but I was really nobody then. And he goes, "You got to do something." And I was like, "What can I do?" It's like, "We just got to do something." Anyway, I go on, talk to other people, and come by. "You got to do something about certification." This went on for probably about 30 minutes. So finally, it's like, why? And this guy started telling me his life story, and my heart really broke for him because he had been a tech writer in the military industry, in the defense industry. And it was a very particular way of writing things up and a very particular technology. But it was 1993, and if you know anything about your history of the early 90s, this was when the Cold War ended and defense spending went down and consumer spending had not gone up, and it was going into the software, really software tech writing, not military writing. And it's a different skill because instead of writing for highly trained, military technicians, you're writing for very novice end users. So it's a real different sensibility. Technologies were different. And he was not getting hired because he didn't have that sensibility. And the issue was he got fat and happy in his old job, and he never kept his skills up to date. Or he only kept them up to date enough to stay employed there, never thinking the impossible, which is, what if this job ended? And so to me, making sure that people remain employable is really an important part of the work that I do. And that's why it matters, because it means maintaining employability, which brings me back to Judge Judy. Now, as I said, she's the only one who for many years really got away with not developing her digital skills. Let's fast forward. There was an invention of this little device in 2010 called the iPad. Well, apparently, she took to it. But I want to talk a little bit more recently. If anybody, has anybody paid attention to Judge Judy's recent career developments? These are fascinating. Well, I have some really almost bad news. Then there's a little discrimination, and then there's some possibly good news. So we'll start with the bad news. Judge Judy came to an end after 25 years. She didn't like how much money they were spending at CBS. So she decided to move into the modern age. She is now with Amazon, streaming on Freevee TV with a show called Judy Justice. And what's really cool is, instead of being a $5,000 limit, now there are $10,000 worth of criminal arguments and cases. The other thing that she does with the additional time, which I find really fascinating, okay, there's a little nepotism involved because she hired one of her grandchildren to be a court something or other. But after each case, they actually talk the legal stuff instead of, like for television, they just liked her yelling at people, but in the Freevee TV version, she actually explains her judgments and why she made them. So when she just says, "I don't care about that," in that session, she'll explain why she didn't care about it. So there's a little educational element there. But here's the prejudice part, or the bias. We don't have it in Canada. So when you go to the US, you can get it for free, www.freeveetv.com. And then you just look for Judy Justice, and you can just watch to your little heart's delight. 2 seasons already. But what I think it really shows is that she's actually gone from being afraid of new technology to being on the leading edge of a major transition. And just to show you how timely this is, a little bit more substantively, I don't know if you paid attention to the announcements from CBC on Monday, but they see the end of broadcasting. They will be streaming. They're not sure it's going to happen by 2030, but they do expect to stop broadcasting. So take advantage of these 2 days to build your awareness of the technologies and how they might affect your work and build your skills. And remember, remain employable as long as you choose to work. Thank you very much for your time.
I guess, thank you so much, Saul.
You're welcome.
For all that. So we've got lots of activities, lots of schedules, so please, we'll see you in the other sessions, and thanks everybody for joining. Thank you so much. That was
welcome.
great.
Thanks.